The pediatric oncology ward at General Hospital, Lagos, sat in a hush so deep it felt like time itself dared not move. The low hum of machines, the muted shuffle of nurses' shoes, and the sterile scent of antiseptic created a world detached from the chaos outside. In one dimly lit corner room, Amara Benson, 16 years old but aged far beyond her years, sat by the bedside of her younger brother, Toby. At just 8, Toby was fighting a battle too big for his tiny body, leukemia in its cruelest final stage. Doctors had stopped offering false hope weeks ago. Now, only comfort remained. Amara brushed his damp forehead gently, humming under her breath. Then she began to sing, "You Are My Sunshine," her voice untrained, a little shaky but raw and haunting in its simplicity. It was the song their late mother had sung to them during thunderstorms, scraped knees, and long nights when grief tried to swallow them whole. Now, Amara gave the song back to her brother, a fragile offering of love in a moment when words no longer sufficed. Toby's tired smile flickered like a candle, his eyes fluttering shut as if the sound wrapped him in something warmer than the thin hospital blanket could ever provide. Unbeknownst to her, just one room over, separated only by a paper-thin walla man, stood frozen. Dara Cole, 28, was a former music producer who had all but vanished from the industry after a breakdown left him creatively paralyzed and emotionally bankrupt. He was only here today for a short visit with his niece, a fellow patient. Burnt out, bitter, and perpetually hungover on regret, Dara had wandered the halls while waiting for test results. But now, standing still, his breath caught in his throat. That voice, he couldn't see her, but the sound gripped him like a hand reaching into his chest. It wasn't perfect, but it was true. It reminded him of everything he once believed music could do: heal, reveal, transform. He instinctively pulled out his phone, hit the record button, and captured a few seconds of the song, not for fame or profit, but because it felt like the first honest thing he'd heard in years. In that moment, as the quiet lullaby leaked through sterile walls, two lives, one nearly ending, the other long stalled and knowingly brushed against each other, and something in both of them shifted. Amara Benson lived in a tiny two-room flat, in the heart of a Jeginor Lagos neighborhood full of noise, resilience, and struggle. She shared the space with her aunt Ngozi, a kind but perpetually exhausted woman who juggled two jobs, one as a cleaner at a school, and another selling roasted plantains on the roadside at night. Since the death of Amara's parents in a tragic road accident 2 years ago, the responsibility of caring for her younger brother, Toby, had fallen squarely on Amara's teenage shoulders. At 16, she was no longer just a sister, she was mother, nurse, an emotional anchor to a little boy who was dying faster than she could save him. Amara had once dreamt of becoming a singer. Her notebooks, once full of lyrics, now sat untouched under the bed, collecting dust. Music still lived inside her, but there was no room for dreams in her world any more, not when hospital bills loomed, not when Toby's small hand clutched hers every night in pain. She sang now only for him, and even that felt like clinging to hope with fingertips bleeding from too much grasping. Toby Benson, at just 8 years old, carried a quiet wisdom that softened even the most hardened nurses at General Hospital. Despite the cancer that had ravaged his small body, his spirit remained intact. He loved football, even if he could only watch it on a small cracked TV in the ward. He hated the hospital gowns, the smell of bleach, and the sadness in his sister's eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. But he still believed in miracles. He believed Amara's voice had power, believed she'd one day sing on the radio, that people would listen to her the way he did every night, like she was singing sunlight into the dark. Meanwhile, in a much quieter, much colder apartment across town, Dara Cole drifted through his own kind of survival. Once celebrated as Nigeria's Pharrell, a musical genius who infused Afrobeat with global soul, Dara had crashed spectacularly. After his younger brother, his best friend and creative partner, of an overdose following a bitter falling out with their manager. That betrayal and the guilt Dara carried for pushing his brother too hard, too fast, had silenced him. He disappeared from the public eye, ghost-producing jingles for ads he didn't care about, refusing interviews and rejecting offers from record labels hungry for a comeback. He no longer believed in music as salvation. He no longer believed in much at all. Presently, Amara's days were a blur of commuting between the hospital and home, navigating borrowed money and whispered prayers. She was exhausted in ways she couldn't speak of, the kind of tired that goes beyond the body and takes root in the soul. Toby's health declined faster than the doctors expected, and the nurses began to look at her with gentle, practiced pity. Still, Amara came every day, holding his hand, fluffing his pillows, and singing. Her voice, though frayed by grief, remained the one consistent light in Toby's dimming world. She sang as if her song could reverse time, as if melody could convince death to wait a little longer. And through the paper-thin hospital wall, a man who had once stopped believing in sound found himself unable to stop listening. The hospital smelled more of loss than medicine that morning. The pediatric oncology ward, already understaffed and overstretched, had been hit with budget cuts. Amara was called into the small side office by a tired-looking doctor with kind eyes but tired hands. She didn't need him to speak, she'd learned to read faces. But he spoke anyway, carefully, apologetically. Toby would be discharged by the end of the week. Palliative care at home were the words they used, but Amara heard the truth behind them. It meant, go home, there's nothing more we can do. It meant, start preparing for goodbye. Amara sat still in the chair, her hands clenched in her lap, throat burning but dry. She wanted to scream. Instead, she asked if there was any way to keep him longer, just a few more days. But the answer was written in budget charts and administrative signatures. There was no space left for mercy. She rushed to her Aunt Njosi's workplace straight after, heart pounding with panic. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, but Njosi, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron at the back of the bakery, shook her head helplessly. There was no more money. They'd already sold the TV, the old generator, and half the pots in the house. They were surviving on crumbs and prayer. Amara didn't cry in front of her, and she had learned to be strong where others folded. But that night, with Toby asleep and the machines humming their tired lullabies, Amara slipped out of the ward and wandered into the hospital's tiny chapel, hidden behind stained glass and flickering candlelight. She sank to her knees beneath a wooden cross and finally let it all spill out. Her grief, her fury, her fear. And then she sang not for an audience, not even for God, but to hold herself together. Rise Up by Andrade rose from her like a lament, breaking the silence like a bird crashing through a window. Her voice was cracked, raw, imperfect and unbearably beautiful. Unbeknownst to her, Dara Cole had heard her again. He had lingered after visiting his niece, hoping he might catch a sliver of that voice he'd heard the day before. And there it was, bleeding through the chapel doors, turning stone into something soft. He stood just outside, motionless, listening to every note like it was a confession. When the last word faded into silence, he stepped forward gently. Your voice, it doesn't just sing, it bleeds, he said quietly, not wanting to frighten her. Amara turned, startled. Her eyes narrowed when she saw him. I'm not a singer, she said, tiredly. I just do it for him. Her words were dismissive, defensive, but Dara could see the truth. She was someone trying to keep a promise with her voice. Later that night, he sat in his car and replayed the recording on his phone again and again. He had captured just 30 seconds of her song before lowering the device, out of respect. But it was enough. He stared at the screen, hesitating, heart-battling mind. Then, impulsively, he uploaded the short clip to his social media account, anonymous. No names, Just the caption. She sings like she's saving a life. Maybe she is. He put his phone down, telling himself it was nothing. Just a moment of beauty the world deserved to hear. But deep down, he already knew it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. By dawn, the video had spread across platforms like wildfire. The 30-second clip of a girl singing "Rise Up" in a dim hospital chapel hit a nerve in a way that felt universal. Music bloggers reposted it. Influencers added captions like "This voice sounds like it's fighting for someone's life," and comments poured in, thousands of them. Strangers wrote about crying at their desks, remembering loved ones lost, and feeling seen by a voice they didn't know. The internet was captivated, but no one could answer the question that now burned everywhere. Who is this girl singing in the hospital? For Amara, who had no idea the clip had been posted, life still revolved around worrying over Toby's next round of medicine and stretching the little money left for bus fare and meals. Dara hesitated for a day before seeking her out again. The attention was snowballing, and the longer she remained nameless, the more vultures circled. He found her back in the hospital, braiding Toby's hair gently while he dozed. She looked up when she saw him and instantly stiffened. "Why are you here again?" she asked. Dara sat, holding up his phone without pressing play. "You went viral," he said. "Millions of people have heard your voice." Her brows furrowed in confusion. And when he explained what he'd done, posting the video without asking, her eyes burned with betrayal. "You used me, my pain, my brother's pain for clicks," she spat, standing up, voice trembling with restrained fury. Dara didn't defend himself with excuses. Instead, he told her about his brother, the one he had built a music empire with, the one whose overdose Dara had never forgiven himself for. "I didn't save him," he said. "I had the tools, I had the influence, but I was too late. And I see the same light in you I saw in him. But this time, I want to get it right." The vulnerability in his voice caught Amara off guard. She looked away, silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter. "Okay, but no spotlight, no stage. If I sing again, it's for him. The money, the attention, it all goes to Toby." They met the next day at a modest recording studio Dara still had access to through an old friend. There were no flashing lights or expensive gear, just a microphone, a keyboard, and the dusty smell of potential. They recorded "You Are My Sunshine" first. Amara stood behind the mic, eyes closed, imagining Toby's hand in hers. When she sang, even the sound engineer wiped away tears. "Rise Up" came next. Dara kept the studio lights low and gave her space. It was raw, more prayer than performance. Within 48 hours, both songs were uploaded to streaming platforms under an anonymous profile, and Dara's contacts in the music world helped amplify it. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. Celebrities reposted the tracks, praising the emotional depth of her voice. A-list musicians called her the future. Donations poured in thousands, then tens of thousands. A verified crowdfunding page was set up by Dara to help with Toby's treatment. The hospital agreed to extend his care. Specialized doctors were brought in. For the first time in weeks, Amara saw hope returning to her brother's face. But with the good came the hard. The media pressure intensified. Reporters started snooping around the hospital. Photos of Amara leaving the ward appeared on gossip. Blogs, speculation buzzed. Who was this girl with the golden voice? Why was she hiding her identity? Hospital officials grew uncomfortable with the attention and began discussing protocol violations. Some nurses whispered about her. Amara's once quiet world felt under siege. Her aunt Ngozi sat her down one evening, concern etched deep into her forehead. "These people," she said, "they'll take what they want and leave you empty. Protect your heart, Amara. Not everyone who claps for you loves you." Amara nodded but said nothing. That night, while holding Toby's hand, She watched a video of herself singing something Dara had sent her privately. She saw the pain in her eyes, the desperation, and underneath it, something else, strength. But she also began to see the cost. Her peace was gone. She couldn't walk down the street without curious looks. Her schoolmates had found the video. Messages flooded her inbox, some kind, others invasive, and Dara, once her quiet supporter, now felt like a bridge to everything. Overwhelming tension began to build between them. She felt like she was losing control of her own story, like it was slipping through her fingers and becoming someone else's narrative. Dara noticed the distance. He tried to reassure her, to remind her that everything they were doing was for Toby. But Amara wasn't sure anymore. What happens when people get tired of the story? She asked one night. What happens when my voice isn't enough? Dara didn't have an answer. He wished he did. The silence between them stretched. The song that had once saved her was now the weight dragging her down. Toby's condition worsened suddenly, without warning. One moment he was laughing weakly at Amara's attempt to dance beside his bed, and the next, he was wheezing, eyes fluttering, monitors screaming. Nurses flooded the room, pushing Amara aside as they rushed him down the corridor. She stood frozen, her back pressed to the wall, fists clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms. The doctor later explained there was internal bleeding. He needed emergency surgery, and it needed to happen now. The cost was staggering. Amara stared at the figure on the paper as if it were written in another language. She left the office, in silence, her feet numb beneath her. When Dara arrived at the hospital later that evening with food and hope, she was waiting. Her anger exploded. "Don't bother," she said, her voice brittle. "There's no more fairy tale ending. No more. Save your producer. I'm done singing for people's pity." Dara tried to speak, but she cut him off, eyes wet and fierce. "You made me hope again. That was the real betrayal. You made me believe this world would give someone like Toby a chance, someone like me, and now he's dying again, and I'm back where I started." She walked away, refusing to let him see her cry. She expected him to argue, to defend himself, to say something that made it all worse. But he didn't. He just nodded slowly and left without a word. When he didn't call or show up the next day or the one after, Amara assumed he was gone for good. In truth, Dara had gone into survival mode. He sold the last of what he owned, his old studio equipment, a vintage keyboard signed by WizKid, even his car. He liquidated everything quietly and handed the money directly to the hospital administrator. "No name attached," he said. "Just tell her someone believes in her brother too." He walked out unnoticed, back to his now empty flat. Meanwhile, Toby survived. The surgery was brutal, but he came through, fragile and thread-thin, but alive. Amara sat beside him, holding his hand, barely able to breathe from the relief. When he finally opened his eyes, blinking at the ceiling, his first words were soft but clear. "I heard you, you know. Even when I was asleep, your singing kept me here." She broke down completely. In all the noise, the viral fame, the fear, she had forgotten the most important thing her voice had always been for him. That was its truest purpose. She didn't need the world to listen, just him. A few days later, Amara woke to dozens of missed calls and message alerts. Her aunt knocked on her door, holding a phone with tears in her eyes. "You need to see this," she whispered. Dara had uploaded their full studio session, not just the rough tracks, the full production, the harmony, the layers, the emotion, and at the start, a video montage of Amara singing to Toby in the hospital, softly stroking his hair. Over it, Dara's voice narrated their story, his own woven into it like a thread of quiet redemption. "She saved her brother. She helped save me too. He didn't take credit. He gave it, fully, publicly." The video showed Amara's face clearly for the first time. No more shadows, no mystery, just a young woman with a voice like sunlight breaking through clouds. The internet broke. Again, only this time, it was bigger. News stations picked it up. Journalists requested interviews. Celebrities tagged her name. The video surpassed 5 million views in 2 days. But what moved Amara most wasn't the fame or recognition, it was the thousands of comments from people who said things like, "My sister sang to me through chemo. This reminded me of her, and I haven't spoken to my sibling in years. Watching this, I'm calling them now." Her pain had become a vessel for connection, not exploitation. She called Dara. No anger this time, just quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." His voice cracked slightly. "You don't owe me that, but thank you for letting me be part of it." Amara smiled. "This time, I want the spotlight. For him." And just like that, a chapter closed not with noise or applause, but with understanding, with 2 broken people finally learning to let light in. Weeks after, the video changed everything. Amara received an email from a prestigious performing arts academy in Cape Town, South Africa. The subject line simply read, "We heard your voice." She stared at it for nearly an hour before opening it. Inside was an offer: full scholarship, housing, mentorship, everything. They called her voice raw, uncut brilliance, and said the world needed more stories like hers, sung from places that rarely get heard. At first, Amara hesitated. Leaving Toby, even for something this big, felt like betrayal. But life had shifted again, this time with gentler hands. Dara had quietly launched a foundation in his late brother's name, the Damilari Project. Its mission was personal and clear medical aid and long-term care for siblings of terminally ill children. It wasn't a press gimmick. It wasn't about redemption points. It was about legacy. His brothers, Amara's, Toby's, and now countless other families walking the same painful road. Through the foundation, Toby was enrolled in a specialized pediatric care facility, one with music therapy, visiting family programs, and round-the-clock doctors. For the first time in years, Amara could breathe without guilt. She visited Toby every week, sometimes with new lyrics, sometimes just to lay beside him and listen to old voice notes of them giggling as children. Meanwhile, Dara and Amara found themselves slowly navigating a new dynamic. Their relationship never tilted toward romance. It didn't need to. What bound them was something quieter, deeper. They were each other's mirrors. Dara, haunted by the brother he lost and the career he let die. Amara, carrying songs inside her that were never meant for the stage, but found the world anyway. They reconciled over tea one rainy evening in Dara's now modest apartment. He handed her a song draft and said, "If you still want to do this, I'd be honored." Amara took the paper, read it, and looked him in the eye. "Only if we do it my way. No lies, no labels, just truth." Dara smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's all I've ever wanted." And so began a new chapter. Dara returned to the studio, not the one lined with plaques and industry buzz, but a humble space filled with purpose. And Amara, no longer singing in hospital chapels, began recording her first EP. It wasn't about fame. It was about healing, about voice, about turning grief into melody. Together, they weren't chasing dreams. They were building something sturdier, something real. The sun was setting over the quiet park, casting long, golden shadows across the grass. Families strolled by with children, a soft breeze carrying the scent of popcorn from a vendor nearby. In the center of it all, a modest stage had been set up, ringed with fairy lights and folding chairs. It wasn't a stadium, but to Amara, it felt like the world. Off to the side, near the front row, Toby sat in his wheelchair, a blanket across his legs, his eyes bright and tired but full of pride. Amara stood a few paces away, warming up, her hands trembling slightly. She kept sneaking glances at him, as if drawing strength from the rhythm of his breath. The memory of the hospital, Wasn't for it, never would be. But tonight wasn't about pain. It was about everything they had survived. As she turned to walk toward the microphone, Toby reached out and gently tugged her sleeve. She leaned down and he whispered, his voice barely audible but unwavering, "Sing it like you're still in that hospital." Amara looked at him for a long beat, her throat tightening. She gave a small nod. "Always," she whispered back. Then the lights flickered on, soft and golden, bathing the stage in warmth. The crowd settled into silence. Some recognized her from the video, some didn't. But everyone seemed to feel the gravity of the moment. Amara stepped up to the mic, her curls catching the light, her body small but unshaking. She closed her eyes, drew in a breath, and began to sing. No preamble, no introduction, just her voice, clear, aching, honest. She wasn't singing for fame or for survival. She was singing for the little boy whose belief had never wavered, for Dara, for her mother, for herself. Her voice cut through the stillness, carrying the weight of hospital walls and sleepless nights, of grief turned into hope. And as the final note lingered in the air, Amara opened her eyes and saw Toby smiling. This time, she knew exactly who was listening. Fade out.